FTTC.com. So high. Love that hydro make me feel fine, bro. Love that hydro make me feel fine, girl. Love that hydro make me feel high. Feeling so high. Love that hydro make me feel fine, bro. Love that hydro make me feel fine, girl. Love that hydro make me feel high. Feeling so high. She's in the kitchen and they chopping up hydro.
Woo! Had to charge my proxy.
Wednesday,
Welcome, everybody. You know what time it is. Wednesday, 5 o'clock. Your boy, the Hydroponic Chef's back after a little hiatus. You know, we don't be getting in the studio during the summertime. It's a little too hot for that. But we're back for the fall, fresh with a whole batch of news. We got edible reviews. We're the only show offering you interviews with the top names in the industry, edible reviews, and some cannabis news. So you are listening to Farm to Table Cannabis. I am your cannabis chef's favorite cannabis chef, the Hydroponic Chef, aka Chef Dro, aka Chef Hydro, aka I'll keep on cooking until they shut me down. So let's get medicated and educated. We like to start off every week with some industry news, and man, this is a doozy for this year. And you know, with less than a year under the Hawthorne umbrella, it looks like the sun is setting on the Lux brand. So no more Lux lighting after December. That's a crazy development for everyone out there that's been involved with the brand thus far. But we'll see how much develops out of this and see what's next in the world of lighting and innovation. So usually I don't get too much into the politics, but as a, you know, Lux brand representative, gotta address that one right out the rip. So looks like I'll be putting that Gavita hat back on sooner than I thought. But you know, shout out to Lux brand and everybody that was involved with that. It's been a great brand over the years, and you know, it looks like the movement is going in a different direction. And hey, how about those Gavita lights? We got some Gavita lights to talk about later on in the show. And we've also got a great show and the interview lined up with Jacob Mulliken. And Mulliken's going to go over some of the intertwined delicacies that go into making a fantastic documentary about Hunter Thompson. So anything worth doing is worth doing right, as Hunter S. Thompson said. And Jacob has done it, and he's done it for all the right reasons. And we're going to set a spotlight onto the documentary, the NFT, and maybe go into some of his other more ghoulish projects he's worked on in the past. So as always, we like to start off with a little bit of news in the industry. And we're going to take it out to Maryland for the first one after, you know, very little female representation in Maryland's medical marijuana program. Now that it's up and running, 5 years later, they noticed how much diversity it's lacked. And that's all about to change now that Maryland is one of the most diverse cannabis sectors in the country. Christine B. Johnson holds a special designation in the cannabis industry because of her biracial heritage. And she's currently the only African-American and Latina in the country to have a cultivation license. So despite that, Johnson gives Maryland high marks for its effort in diversity in the industry. Maryland has done a phenomenal job, she says, at diversifying the sector. And they've actually had one of the most diverse sectors in terms of business owners in the biggest turnaround. So according to the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission fiscal year 21 report, 6 out of 21 growers' licenses are minority owned. And out of those 14, 26 processor licenses are minority owned. And 39 of those 90 dispensary licenses are minority owned. So coming into cannabis can be difficult for any new entrepreneur, and you typically have to go through equity licensing, financing to get the sector because regular banks won't lend to you, Johnson went on to say. And that's because the federal government still considers cannabis Schedule I drug and therefore illegal. So financing a cannabis business is not easy. It requires a lot of upfront capital. If question 4 passes, it would create a cannabis business assistance fund to assist small minority-owned and women-owned businesses entering the adult use cannabis industry. So 2 of these women share a very unconventional path to creating these female-centric dispensaries in Greenhouse Wellness in Elliott City is a woman-owned dispensary, and Gina Dubb, a retired entrepreneur, and her friend Lesbi Apgar, a doctor, are both co-owners. And there's no accident for this business for her. She said it's intentional. She said she's a board certified OBGYN, and that's all changed 6 years ago when a businessman suggested starting a cannabis company. So they got their funding. He approached them, and people said that they would never understand the math, but she got angry. She doubled down on herself, and she put the proposal together for 2016 and flipped it all over the wall, and they got a dispensary. So they combined this with the business savvy from Apgar's medical knowledge, and thus the female-centric dispensary was started. So you love hearing about this in Maryland. If question 4 passes, it'll be a big step in the right direction for Maryland. And the cannabis business definitely is evolving out there. So you see a lot of things changing, and it's time that, they start giving every aspect of ownership an opportunity. So as the evolution continues, we'll keep an eye on that in the story out there in Maryland. But for the time being, let's take it out to the Central America. We're going to go to Arkansas, Maryland, Missouri, North Dakota, and South Dakota. They would all join 19 other states where the cannabis has already been legalized for personal use. And a recent poll from Mammoth University shows that 68% of American public support legalization, possession of small amounts for marijuana for personal use. And this support is differential to income and educational differences, polling shows. And in addition, 19 other states have legalization on the market. So the more people learn about cannabis and the policy, the more that we're going to see them support and make the cannabis legal among other states. So Arkansas has got issue 4, a proposed amendment to the state constitution that will make it the state have its first in the Deep South to legalize recreational marijuana. A vote issue for 4 brings forth job creation, bolsters our economy in Arkansas, and also brings new general revenue money, Eddie Armstrong tells the NPR. And then it's like the debate's over, really. Arkansas, it's time to go legal in Arkansas. And then next, South Dakota, initiative measure 27 marks the latest effort to legalize recreational marijuana, and voters approved it into 2020, only to have it thrown out by the Supreme Court in the state. So now that the president's receded, hardening thousands of medical cannabis federal charges for simple possession, we'll have to see if it has any impact on question 5 and measure 27 in where are we at over there in South Dakota. So big things changing in the South and the Northeast, and you see cannabis continuing to pop up on the ballots for other initiatives. So, we got to take it out to Fairfield for a minute because it's not all positivity, sunshine. Over 250 pounds of cannabis was seized in a Fairfield bust. Police recovered 216 marijuana plants and over 216 pounds of processed cannabis in Fairfield. And the Fairfield Police Department says that it's received anonymous tips from residents in the area concerning a possible illegal marijuana grow at a home on the 1600. I'm not going to give out their address. That's a messed up. Why they be doing that, putting people's address out there like that? But the warrant was served on October 20th, just after 3 p.m. And they came in, and the Humane Animal Officer Services came and removed the pit bull as well as other dogs. So that's the whole thing of this one. They're going after everything. They're not just the weed. They take your dogs, and they took anything else you have. That goes for firearms too. If you have firearms and you have dogs and you got plants, they're gonna throw the book at you for that one, man. That's like cannabis is a weird state right now, and they're going after the black market like never before. And you can thank the white market for taking so many of the black market packs from the streets. That actually encourages the local police department to go after that side of the market. So if the black market's failing and you see the bust continue, there's a reason for that. And you want the prices to go back to where they were. Wait for some of these legislations to ease up on the local busts. Prices are at an all-time low. And speaking of all-time lows, Now's not a great time to get into the cannabis stock sector either. You know, as people talk about what's going on in the cannabis industry, they forget that there's a white market for cannabis too, and a lot of those companies are publicly traded. And right now, they say buy the dip, and I'm not quite sure the dip is hit yet. And waiting for that moment to get in timing that bounce back, it's it's an art. And timing cannabis's bounce back during this hydropocalypse is going to be an even more challenging moment. There's no magic ball for this. There's no forecasting that you can just use. The last time it was like this was 2017, 2016, and the industry rebounded. Here we are, closing in on the end of 2022, and we're hoping that halfway through the season, maybe there's something to salvage in 2023. But your boy was screaming about a hydropocalypse back in February, and here we are, months later, and there's not really an ending in sight. And it's not going to be long until cannabis is treated just like any old regular agricultural crop in the nation. And right now, it's already. And I'll go into this article from Leafly. Legal cannabis is already America's sixth biggest cash crop. And if you think about that, that's over so much other crops there is. Prepared to spend far less of your percentage of income on cannabis as legalized weed spreads and prices tumble. So here, according to new Leafly Cannabis Harvest Report published today, cannabis prices tumbled despite another year of historic inflation. Adult use cannabis farmers in the U.S. grew 554 metric tons of cannabis in 2022 than they did the year before. Still, the crop's value fell by $1 billion. That's because legalization makes the price of pot go down. Large-scale farming and high technology have driven the wholesale prices to historic lows in Colorado, and farm grams can go as low as $4 in Oregon. Price promises to fall further, and this goes right into what I was saying: is there's no end in sight. We're only 1/4 of the way out of prohibition, according to reports. And how much illegal weed does the U.S. grow? Listen to this. This scares me. Holy shit! All right, how much legal weed? Gallup reports that about 68% of Americans are ready to end the 85-year-old war on marijuana and switch to a regulated system, but so far not a single regulatory or politician give you the progress report on what that switch would look like. And Leafly can, though. According to the second annual Leafly Cannabis Harvest Report, adult use cannabis farmers grew from 2,834 metric tons in the last year, based on federal use surveys, and 2,834 tons comprises only about 1/4 of the Americans' annual demand for cannabis. So we are really only 24% out of this disastrous failed prohibition. To get out, the remaining prohibition states are going to legalize, as well as Congress is going to have to legalize, and it's going to take all of our voices. So Leafly's cannabis report found that generally Western U.S. weed farmers grew too much over the last year, and meanwhile, the Midwest and Eastern farmers did not grow enough to meet their region's demand because of the federal prohibition. So licensed farmers cannot sell across interstate lines, and however, the illicit market does. This dynamic hurts legal weed farms across the Midwest and changing on all the way to the East Coast customers. Residents from Illinois to Maine, for example, pay some of the highest prices for cannabis in the country, while Colorado, Oregon, and California pay for the lowest. Our findings suggest that Congress needs to do the will of 68% of the voters and send the reform bills to the president. And American wants to vote for their dollar for craft, legal, sustainable cannabis. And if you want to, affect the hypocrisy of the democracy, you got to make yourself heard. And that was one of the things that our next guest hero, and one of my personal heroes, Hunter S. Thompson, was, he made himself heard. He fought the system. And if you're going to make yourself heard and fight the system, you got to use the platform you have. And, shout out to Leafly for putting this article together, because, it's using the platform you have to make yourself heard. And that's exactly what the Gonzo journalism stood for, is, using the platform you had to make yourself heard. And that's a great segue into introducing my guest for the evening. Jacob Mulliken, thank you so much for joining us, my man.
Thank you, sir, for having me. Hold on, I've got to give the gentleman, my buddy Eric Hatcher owns this place, Dibs, this thing of ice, because we're drinking vodka and rearranging all this business back.
That's right. Welcome to
the self-promotion
cannabis show. That's right. Pull up, get a drink, light a joint. I see a lot of nice artwork in the background too there.
Yeah, man. It's instead of doing it at my house, I asked my buddy, I was like, hey man, I'm doing this great podcast and talking about my hunter thing. Can I sit in your place? Because there's a ton of weird shit.
Yeah, man, let's get it. Let those freak flags fly.
That's exactly right.
So, I mean, everyone, welcome Jacob Mulliken. He's a filmmaker, journalist, a special needs teacher, former special needs teacher too, film professor, and all around chill ass dude.
Thank you, sir.
And so,
man, I unleashed this thing for you, man. I found like a William S. Burroughs cobra-headed, like James Bond villain snake sword.
No, well, that goes without saying. Anything worth doing right, you scurvy knave. Let me see you put that in your teeth. Good God, that's a big fucker that you got there. Jeez.
Oh, we could do some like Captain Blood level shit,
I was thinking we could cut some fruit or some citrus of some sort. Mm-hmm.
We were just doing that actually. We're doing vodka. Well, I'll cut whatever we have here left in the fridge. It's pretty much what we've been doing.
You gotta pull out the big weapon sometimes. Desperate times calls for desperate measures, and that's how we find ourselves in this weird world that we're in. We are on the precipice of something, and like I was talking about, calling out the hypocrisies and talking a little bit about some of what Gonzo journalism stood for and making yourself heard using the platform. And you just have to wonder, like, if we're in another one of those situations in this world where we're just like ready to blow, and someone like with the thought frame and the thinking of Hunter Thompson would just be calling out the constant hypocrisy and the back and forth and the no movement in this political landscape. And I try not to get into political agenda too much on this show, but if you're going to talk about Hunter S. Thompson, you can't help but talk about the hypocrisy of our democracy.
Well, that's actually something that comes up a lot in my documentary about him. All the people that I've interviewed for the thing, close family and friends, most of them actually journalists. And that's one thing that constantly comes up throughout the thing is there needs to be another Hunter Thompson. There's a lot of references from those closest to him in it that every generation kind of has that archetype. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, as kind of fucked up and weird as the world is now, there absolutely needs to be that kind of person that's calling bullshit. I think the fascinating thing, and I think about it a lot, is it'd be interesting to see someone that could use that style, try to use that style in a world that's so incredibly weird in its own right. Like in Hunter's heyday with like Nixon was a big foil for him, especially a literary foil. Now everybody's equally that fucked. And so how much hyperbole can you make in such a hyperbolized world? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just such a bizarre time. And especially we're still with the whole cannabis issue still happening. I mean, my home state of Kentucky, I mean, Jesus, our number one export is still weed. It's black market. They don't make any money off of it.
That bluegrass state, when it used to be. That bluegrass state.
That's it. Well, we like our bluegrass. You know what I mean? But I mean, it's still a state where, our federal delegations were big on the whole federal hemp movement. Remarkably, McConnell, who's, the year to the turtle of fucking federal politics, just a terrible human being all around. And we managed to, while pushing it federally, crush it in our own state. It's quite, the draconian weed politics of this state are incredibly odd. That's why when we met, I did the show in LA. It was so cool to be in a place where you could just sit at a bar and freely talk about weed without, looking over your shoulder and wondering who's listening, what they're up to, what kind of evil, anti-weed scheme they may have.
Well,
we're here that way.
And that's what they're doing right now. They're putting a kibosh on the creativity by making it impossible to be yourself. And I mean, you look at everything from the way freedom of speech is treated to cancel culture to the political environment. People are being put in this box now where it's not okay to be a freak. It's not okay to let your opinion fly. It's not okay to have a conversation amongst people that might go somewhere and offend someone, and maybe we come to a common agreement somewhere. So it's kind of weird to see where this is going, how people really aren't able to call the bullshit out like it used to be, and we don't have that flag, right? We don't have that person who, and I'll be damned if it's going to be the Kanye West is the biggest freak we can come up with, right?
It may very well be what's next. I mean, you know, we don't know. I mean, what's really going to fuck people up is if that guy's right.
Yeah.
You know, that'd be the most horrible thing in the I mean,
then we really have some answers to go to. But I mean, and those are the outrageous things. And now you look at the parallels, and in no way am I saying Hunter had any of those crazy views, but he was outspoken. Hunter S. Thompson was someone that would say something that was for his time, not something that you could say in public. And he would go on record saying something at the time to be the bad guy. And you look at it, and I think of characters like him that were willing to be the bad guy, and history taught over the time that maybe their objectivity to the system is really the way that we're supposed to be looking at this. And we shouldn't just be going along with everything they say. And, you know, the inspiration, I imagine some of that was taken into the documentary. The documentary's name is Doomed, Hunter S. Thompson's American Dream, or Death of the American Dream, if you will. So to talk about how that some of that in this hypocrisy in this environment inspired you to do this, and the show that goes along with it.
Well, you know, I mean, one part was, you know, the first time I did mushrooms, actually, ironically enough, I was living above a Chinese restaurant here in Bowling Green, and a friend of mine brought over the DVD of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and the grip of mushrooms. I was like, okay, sure, why not? We're here. And then after watching that, you know, that was my gateway into Hunter. I read all the books, and he's also a fellow Kentuckian. You know, he's from Louisville, Kentucky. And what fascinated me about Hunter was kind of the impetus of why I did my doc, not only why I did the doc, but why I did it the way I did it, is the persona, in my view, and I mean, it's not even my view, you know, I mean, it's what happened, is the persona overtook the man's not only genius, but his relevance and his impact, especially in the realm of journalism. You know, I mean, how many motherfuckers create their own school of journalism? Him. You know what I mean? And he was part of that whole new journalism with like Tom Wolfe, a lot of those guys from that era as well. But you know, for me, what was fascinating, and to your point earlier, like if you look at now, Hunter was writing about and warning about shit in the 60s and 70s, and we have not really changed that much in terms of the political arguments that are happening. You know, basic human rights, looking at the injustice in the you know, in the legal system in terms of small time offenders, especially focusing on minority groups, all that. I mean, these are all things covered in Hunter's work. And with the American Dream, and why I chose the title, is that was the major kind of crux and theme of all Hunter's works. He was probably one of the biggest believers in the idea of the American experiment and what we could be, and was constantly let down, which is what led him to, you know, run for sheriff, what got him such into the political game. And what was brilliant about what he did with gonzo journalism, and this gentleman that I interviewed in the doc, his name's Ed Bastian, who worked on Hunter's campaign and was part of the Freak Power movement in Aspen, is that Hunter would use his celebrity and his just incredible turn of phrase and wit to take something like, you know, when he ran for sheriff, part of his campaign policy was shitty drug dealers would be putting stocks on the front of the courthouse lawn in the middle of town. Not all drug dealers, just the ones that sold shitty dope. You know, he wanted to rip up the streets of Aspen, bring them back to dirt roads, but he would use these extremes so people would go, "Oh my God, this fucking guy's, you know, insane." But then they'd actually look at the issue,
and you would get
come more middle to center, you know. And that was the brilliance of what he was doing and what he was able to do, because Pat Buchanan, and you know, those two were friends, and Buchanan was, you know, a big part of the Nixon machine. Buchanan described Hunter's book as Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail as the most factual and least accurate book ever written about politics.
It's just because it's the extremes of the comparisons and the and analogies of things. And, you know, when you're comparing something and you got a mind like hunters, and you're going into gonzo, and now people are, let's be honest, people are feeding into that. Now you're being rewarded for thinking outside the box. Now you're being rewarded for causing attention to things. It encourages you to let it flow, and be let's go into this timeline of things before Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, before Running for Sheriff, before Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and Johnny Depp and all that. Hunter Thompson was a young man born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1937, in the middle of a fucking crazy world. You think about that, in the middle of I guess all you could say is World War II was riding around, getting right around the corner. Hunter Thompson joins the Navy in 1956. On our, fired for.
Yeah, he was making Air Force base. Yeah, he got he'd gotten busted for some but we'll just say youthful antics in Louisville, and kind of had an option, either Air Force or jail.
Yeah, and then of course he gets let go of the Army for insubordination and bad influence of others, and I'm sure I can only imagine the stories that go behind that. And then Time Magazine starts writing for Time Magazine, and I think that's where we can say we're all the Hunter Thompson that we have grown up with as cult fans, and people that were turned on to him by generations behind us, or the people that turned us on to shrooms or whatever for our first time. That's the Hunter that really you start to go into and talk about in your documentary. And that,
yeah, well, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I think that's really some of the more interesting times in his life, when he was making that transition from someone whose voice wasn't heard, someone who was always fighting the system, trying to call out injustices and call the fucking world on its bullshit, to now having this platform where people are listening to you now, and your words, they're living in Time Magazine. And now you could see the transition that went along with that. And I just thought it was interesting that, that's kind of where the documentary kind of can come full circle, is like, there's a start to this, and you go into the full timeline of it.
Well, and I looked at it very academically, right? Like, it's because I wanted to really pull back the veneer of that persona, the Raul Duke, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Go on.
The Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas bit, which was the Raul Duke, the persona that would later happen. A lot of people that dig him, because part of the power that's in it, I'd like people to read more of his work with this thing. As more people watch it, as we find a good platform to work with and have it out there, my goal is just people just read his shit. Because he was, for instance, Rum Diary, the last film really done about him. Johnny Depp was in it, and that was really the only novel Hunter had written. What brought Hunter to Puerto Rico is that he had found a job writing for a bowling magazine, because bowling was big shit in Puerto Rico at that time. And so, his story of being what led to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he was a very dedicated, not only a journalist, but a writer. He would sit in his room as a kid and retype things like The Great Gatsby, retype Hemingway's works, Faulkner, so he could learn the rhythm of what it is to write that well. And George Stranahan, friend of Hunter's, he was his landlord, actually. He's the guy that sold the property for Owl Farm, which was Hunter's HQ outside of Aspen in Pitkin County. There's a bit in the doc where he goes, Hunter was very meticulous with his wording. As you know, if you read his shit, he was, because he thought, what would a well-known, famous, and prolific American writer sound like? So he was very conscious of the words he used, how he used them, what he wrote about. And especially now, like we've been talking, the political aspect, he was a sports junkie and a political junkie. And, Hunter had written himself, part of that attraction with politics is because it was a lot like sports. It's a big gambling arena. And that's what I want people to walk away from with this. And, the style of it, and I know you'll show it here in a bit, is instead of doing, a traditional hour and a half long doc, especially given the attention span and that we're all watching more shorter form things, it's 9 episodes that are between 8 and 10 minutes long. So people can actually watch it, go back, rewatch it, whatever. but it really is just an in-depth look at the man's relevance, because you can't really, once you understand Hunter Thompson outside of the notion of being a party guy, a wild man, and all that, when you read his canon, you can't help but to even see, especially with like talking head journalism now, the influence of Hunter's work. Now, people have perverted that notion of inserting yourself into the middle of the story, which was gonzo journalism. But I mean, his influence is everywhere, I feel journalistically.
Well, and you took some of that same gonzo approach from journalism and applied it to your documentary. And you didn't just and dive into a Wikipedia page and Google some shit and learn. You fucking jumped in your car and you did a road trip. And I mean, I'd love for you to touch on a little bit about that and just what the fuck it takes to actually apply gonzo to your everyday life and your job and your your mind state.
At the time, I had just moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'd done a feature film there because I started out as an actor, before I even got into making my own films, and was teaching at the same time and all that. Always have a backup plan, I guess. And I had always wanted to do it. And a gentleman that I'd worked with on one feature and it was in my my meltdown, the short zombie short I did. He's like, "What do you have next?" I was like, I've always kind of had a hard on to do this Hunter S. Thompson doc. And I had no fucking clue what I was doing. I was about 26 at that time. And the guy gave me 15 grand. I'm like, okay, well, so I started reaching out to folks. I'd gotten a couple bites back because, the fact that it is Hunter, people that know him are wary about who they let into their lives. Is one, which I found out because there are a lot of just fanboys that'll say something and they just want to go hang out at the house, smoke a bowl, whatever. And so yeah, once I got the budget to do it, I bought a camera. Again, I had no fucking clue what I was doing, and I was like, well, the only way to really do it is to kind of gonzo it. So I rented a car, got a camera, got sound equipment, loaded up a suitcase, had it in the back, of the car with certain party favors when you're driving cross country.
Hawaiian shirts, Chivas,
all kinds of weird shit. Oh yeah, man. Bunch of weed, all that.
High power blotter acid.
At the time, no. But it was very much what that suitcase was. And there was a ton of weed in it. And yeah, I hit the road. And the first person that had said yes to let me interview them, I mean, even before anyone and his friends and family, the first person to say yes was George McGovern, that ran against, Nixon in 1972 and lost horribly. It was the guy he picked as vice president because McGovern had rocked this great grassroots feel, and he was definitely Hunter's candidate, but he picked a pretty establishment VP. And then it was found out that his VP had gone through tremendous amounts of electroshock therapy for depression, which pretty much killed McGovern.
The nuclear codes in the second command of someone who's gone through electroshock therapy.
Yeah. That's so. But yeah, so that was the decision. It's like, well, fuck it. I've sent out emails. I've got some leads. I've got some money. It's the first time I've ever gotten money to, a budget for a film. I was like, fuck it. Yeah, I'll go on the road for a month and see what shakes loose. And yeah, McGovern had said yes, and I was in St. Louis. I got pretty twisted at a blues bar right outside of downtown St. Louis, and at 4 a.m. the next morning, the woman that was running the McGovern Library in Sioux Falls called me, and she's like, "I wanted you to know before it hit the news, George died." I'm like, God damn it. Well, what made matters worse with that is I was leaving St. Louis and beelining to Denver because I really, honest to God, had gotten a hold of some, but had cracked open phone books, like for real Yellow Pages. That's how I got George Stranahan, who's the gentleman that was behind Flying Dog Beer.
Okay.
George started that. It was Ralph Steadman who did the artwork for a lot of Hunter's books. He does the artwork for those bottles. And I'd interview these guys. I would email, and there was the process. But on my way out of fucking St. Louis, I get pulled over because the state trooper's car looked like a mall cop's car. And I smelled of whiskey because I had to get to Denver pretty quick now that I didn't have to go to Sioux Falls. And she wanted to search the bag in the back. I was like, oh, be careful. There's a lot of film equipment back there. And I was like, God damn it, she's going to end up finding my weed. And didn't, thank God, let the film equipment alone. And I sat in her car on the side of the highway and we talked about Hunter Thompson for about 45 minutes.
Yeah, you guys just clicked like wireless routers. Y'all just linked.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a great experience, man. I mean, everyone, once they knew why I wanted to do it, they were very gracious and they would introduce me to friends of theirs. Because, Hunter's got a very tight knit community. He truly does. And people that knew him and loved him are very protective, not only of his legacy, but protecting that legacy from assholes. And I was really, and still am, feel very gracious about it, and got his widow Anita Thompson, his ex-wife Sandy, who was great.
I mean, they were
Ed
really,
Bastian.
really influential on the documentary, and being able to sit down and get interviews with them is not a easy task.
No, and it's really interesting when you're a fan to also have to kind of separate that out and go maintain, I guess, put your fandom aside and look at it very journalistically, because my doc, I mean, there's the animated intro and all that. I used animation a lot, and that was more just so I didn't have to credit or pay people for photos. You know what I mean? So I get the damn thing done. They were all just wonderful and have been through the whole process. I mean, Anita, Hunter's widow, she's still at Owl Farm. She's doing everything she can to keep the Hunter's legacy alive, his relevance, and his friends are the same way. I mean, they really are a really incredible group of people. I was fortunate to be able to hang out with them.
And getting to get in that circle again is no small task. But you threw on your Hawaiian shirts, you got your party favors, you went out on the road, you got the content, and you got some really stellar interviews. And now you can check it out. It's Doomed, Hunter S. Thompson's American Dream, rolling into the next one titled Little Chicago. All right. And then check this one out. He not only did he do the documentary, he put together the nicest launch for this. You guys know me. I cook it up every weekend at the Artistry, and I do my little cannabis catering thing. Well, I walk in one day, and this entire cannabis and consumption lounge is decked out with Hunter Thompson art and TVs playing stuff on loop. And I'm just like, for me, I'm like, yeah, and they're taking it down, and I'm devastated because I'm like, what do you mean? I want to cook around all this. This is great. And so Jacob comes in, and I'm just like infatuated with this. I'm staring at the wall, and I run into a guy. The guy sees me looking, and he immediately brings me to you, Jacob. And I'm like, yo, game recognized game, man.
Yeah, that was it was really funny when the day you and I met, because I had been really enjoying the excellent gravity bongs at Artistry.
Yeah,
and the gentleman you spoke with, he and his wife were actually they worked with me to design that. Rob and Angela Galetta, Why Not Coco, based there in LA. Incredible folks, and they do all kinds of wonderful marketing work and all that, and they've done stuff with like Jack in the Box. And we met because we have a mutual friend that's helped distribute both of our first feature films, which were both horror movies, and they were working on playing with the NFT space in regards to film. Because and that's why I got into it. It was really funny, actually. The night before, my agent Adam Witt from from Siphuno Ventures, which is in Pinkerton, Ohio, he called me the morning after I watched the NFT South Park episode, and he had told me that they wanted to do with their horror flick and with mine, Berserkers, NFTs, moving almost like 10-second short films. And I talked to Rob and Angela, and they're two of my favorite fucking people on the planet, man. It's been a blast. And I called them up one day. I'm like, hey, why don't we do something for the Hunter doc? I haven't released it yet. I don't know if I want to do it the traditional way, which I'm not doing it. And yeah, we worked together to create all that, and they were brilliant. So yeah, it was Rob you met, and I'm glad I walked in when I did. It was pretty serendipitous, and you and I hung out.
That's perfect timing. No coincidences in this world. Freaks find dude, and I found a good freak. Now check it out though. How did you incorporate the NFTs, and where can people find them? Where if they want to check them out?
They're up on OpenSea, which is an NFT trading site, and all they have to do is type in the title of the doc, "Doomed: Hunter S. Thompson's American Dream." They're there. And the pieces, there's 10 of them. One of my favorites, and you're actually showing it right now, is Beatings from Chicago. And that was, from the 1968 Democratic National Convention, where the police, and it really was just it was nationally known police brutality, because you had
one of those precipice moments we were talking about.
And Hunter was there.
Yeah, the nation was ready to fucking burn. Hunter was there, and he watched people get beat in the streets because they protested outside the Democratic National Convention. This was a dark moment in American history right here, and it changed Hunter. You know that it had a profound effect on the way that he looked at our entire political system, our entire police system, and the way that minorities are treated.
Well, it broke his heart, man. I mean, he even spoke about it in the years leading up to his suicide, that it shook him to the core, even then. And, so the artwork, the only piece of art in there that I did for me was the Grim McConnell, because, when I was writing for the Owensboro Messenger Inquirer in Owensboro, Kentucky, it's about an hour away from my hometown, Bowling Green. I was really hitting the whole hemp movement hard here, because I was like, okay, well, if this can pull off, maybe Kentucky will pull its head out of its ass, and get things going with it. At the very least, fucking medical cannabis, which of course they have not. So the Grim McConnell is in there for me.
I gotta go back to Grim McConnell.
God damn, he popped up as soon as I said it too. That's typically what he does. Look at that bastard. That's what he looks like in real life too. I mean, if you see him, that's barely even artistic interpretation. He typically dressed that. Yeah,
you're fired. Awful jackass.
The red eyes. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But all the pieces are based off of, like, with the Talking Heads piece, what you have in your background there. It's the injection of the American dream, and all the TVs. They're playing Nixon and kind of the decades Hunter wrote about, really kind of a smattering. So I wanted every piece to either incorporate great quotes of his or his work. And it was a really cool way, filmmaker, especially independent filmmaker wise, to fuck around with a medium like NFTs that, it's a very galvanizing thing in terms of the burgeoning digital art world, where some people are like, oh, it's a scam, it's ridiculous and whatnot. But for me, which I was totally on board with that initially, but for me as an indie guy, it was a really cool opportunity to kind of fuck around with new ways of not only marketing, but expanding, my film in a visual way.
Absolutely. And so this isn't your first dive into indie filmmaking though. And
no.
I would be missing out if I didn't show, just a little bit of where you came from and where you got your start. Let me see if I can exit this. There we go. And then we've got to show just this immaculate.
Oh yeah, baby.
Why is no one paying attention to me?
The infection began in a Pittsburgh hospital and spread rapidly throughout. The cause being coined as patient zero. Reported to have massacred members of staff before escaping into the Bloomfield area. Reports of infection are coming in as far as Philadelphia, Johnstown, Harrisburg, and Somerset.
Well, because like I said, I was living in Pittsburgh, and this is a place called Mel's Bar that's in Somerset, PA. They let us run amok in that town, dude. They even named a day after the zombie movie.
I mean, look at you guys.
Meltdown Day.
You guys really pulled this off in the middle of the daylight, walking around a town, making a movie, shooting guns, eating bodies. I am like, oh,
Dude,
I'm
the
impressed.
mayor. There's a scene in this film where we ripped the arm off the mayor. They let us close down streets for free. We had all the extras, like the zombie extras and the big street scene in it. They're all locals.
Look at that. That ain't corn syrup. This guy paid for high quality, real fake blood.
Yeah, we actually killed that guy.
That's it.
That was a really talented young actor named Michael Paradise, man. That wanted to be like the dickhead Richard Grieco 80s style boyfriend kind of guy.
Of course.
You know, and with that scene,
there's one in every 80s movie, obviously.
Oh, there has to be. And that whole thing, because it's practical effects. We had to go digital with some just because lighting didn't work. But 99% of the fuckers digital effects. And yeah, we had a blast. And really, that town just accepted us. And we shot that whole fucker for 20 grand. We even burned a house down in it.
Bro.
A buddy of mine's house. It was okay. It wasn't just wanton arson.
The first flick was called Berserkers. Where can they watch Berserkers?
Man, it's on Tubi. I would encourage people to go there, and I really have no idea, just by virtue of, you know, when a distributor gets your thing, they're going to put it on as many platforms as humanly possible. But I always encourage people to go to Tubi.
I heard you're on all platforms, and you're huge in the horror genre for sure now.
I hope so, man. I mean, you know, that the great thing about that flick in true, and we were talking about it earlier, in true fucking zombie fashion, you know, initially it was called Meltdown, and then it through a distributor called Gravitas Ventures, and then that contract ended and it got picked up by another company called Wild Eyes. So the movie refuses to fucking die, which I feel very proud of, given the genre.
That's it. Zombie flick all the way, baby.
Oh yeah. And I watch it every Halloween, you know, because I remember, I mean, it's cool watching it. And I wish I'd have done a director's commentary, because we had so much fun doing it. And it really was a shoestring budget. And we were fortunate to be able to do it. Like I said, 20 grand. We did that whole fucking thing. 20 grand, and the city gave us that. My buddy let me burn his old house down as he was building a new one. We had a lot of fun.
We made money. They paid us to do shit.
It kind of, I mean, that really, if you look at the production value of it and what we got, it would take most people, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars with that kind of budget. But these cats were like, fuck yeah. And what was cool about doing it there, speaking of time and place, was, you know, that's George Romero country, man. That is Night of the Living Dead. Pittsburgh is where it was shot. Romero is the zombie king. And, you know, I'm a complete horror and zombie freak. When I was a film professor, you know, I taught cult films of the 70s. One of my best friends, who was this is at the former Santa Fe University of Art and Design, he taught a horror class. And so, you know, we showed Argento, Giallo, we did all of it. And so it was really cool, because that was the first thing I ever directed. Pretty much my whole basis is, fuck it, let's see if I can get away with it.
How many people can we snuff on film until they stop letting me shoot?
Pretty much, yeah. It's like, how long can I get away with making movies until somebody's just like, you know what, dude, fuck you, stop. You know?
So you took it from zombies, and then the second, and then for the documentary, you went to Hunter Thompson. That's a big jump from one to the other. Almost as big as a jump when Hunter went from you know, working for Time Magazine to getting married to going and riding around with the fucking Hells Angels.
Yeah, man, when they were in San Francisco. And, you know, that was his first commercial success, because up to that point, that really nobody wanted to show. So yeah. He was writing, you know, at times Hunter would write, you know, he would write for multiple newspapers, freelance. And then when he got the offer, he'd written an article. I can't remember the magazine off the top of my head, but he got an offer to write an article about the Hells Angels, which turned into, you know, the strange and terrible saga that was the Hells Angels. And that was his first commercial success. But that still wasn't gonzo. You know, if people read Hells Angels, that's a very straight journalistic book.
That wasn't journalism yet.
No. Gonzo journalism didn't come up until after his Kentucky Derby piece for Scanlon's.
And so that was 1970, January 1st, 1970, with the publication of The Decadent and the Depraved.
Yes.
The Kentucky Derby is.
And that's when he met Ralph Steadman. Steadman had been flown in to do the illustrations, and the whole purpose of that was to really capture, as the title says, the real fucked up atavistic nature of the Kentucky Derby, which is a fellow Kentuckian. The Derby is any horse track is really a wild and bizarre place. I mean, you really see
still allowed to do that. It shows that we're one step away from being gladiators in a fucking coliseum with swords, lions, and fucking letting people just get eaten. We're like this close, Jacob. Like, it just shows the Kentucky is like he about the Mint 400. The Mint 400 is like the Super Bowl, the Lower Oakland Roller Derby, and the Kentucky Derby all rolled into one. And it's just like, dude, this is a type of shit even in the Roman days they'd have been like, hey, that shit's hella dumb, you can't just do that.
No, and I'm a degenerate horse gambler. I would bet on a man fighting a lion in a heartbeat.
Who's taking bets? I'm fucking can't you get them? What do you mean? DraftKings, I got a triple parlay, 3 bears, 2 lions, and a man-on-man gladiator battle. Fool, there's no way I'm losing.
I mean, Jesus Christ, how could you avoid it? You could also do like, the Mark Twain story, the fucking jumping frogs, whatever goddamn county that was. I bet on frogs.
I'm from Calaveras County. I grew up in Angels Camp, guy. I'm from
Get the fuck out of here.
I jumped frogs as a child. Mark Twain is my Mark Twain and Hunter Thompson are my 2 literary heroes. We know about the fucking lead, and like it's serious. So everyone knows I'm a small town kid. So the fact that you just said that, all the DFZ radio guys, they're all going crazy right now because small town jumping frog jubilee. Yes, I jumped my first frog when I was like 6 years old, dude. You had to get down there and jump at the frog and make it jump, and then they had a kids competition. They had a toddlers, and they had all the way to teens to adults, man. And met Jesus. I mean, it's how I met my wife.
Get the fuck out of here. You're from that county?
Hey, guy, I knocked a guy out at the fair one time at the frog jumps. It's my favorite story ever. The guy walks up to me and threw a whole cup of chewing tobacco on my shirt. It's a real hick-ass town, right? And I'm like, yo, man, I don't want to fight in front of my girlfriend. Please just let me walk away. It's her first date with me. It's my wife right now. My first date with me.
And that worked out well. That guy did you a favor, I think.
Dude, right? The guy says, you know what, punk, you all got tattoos older than you. And I was like, oh, fuck, you better hit him. So I headbutted him and I melted him, and my wife squeezed my hand so hard I knew at that moment she loved me, bro. So when in doubt, pull the headbutt.
I'm impressed you go with the headbutt. No one ever expects the headbutt.
It's so underutilized. It's why they're
ready to haymaker, and if you just come in right,
you got it. It's timing. It's all about timing. And
see, this is it. This is why the proper freaks meet each other, man.
That's it. Right. And so, speaking of timing, I think it's a perfect time in the show to get an intermission where we get loaded, and let's give the folks out at DFZ Radio Listener Land, YouTube, and High Times TV a second to watch a little bit of a sneak preview of the documentary, courtesy of Jacob. So this is Doomed, the documentary, American Dream. And if you can see my screen, I'm going to play this. There we go.
Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
One night, we were so late. It was the 50th anniversary for 50th? Or the Playboy. I think it was the 50th anniversary of Playboy, so there was no way to push this deadline. And he was there a few weeks late. You know, he could make it. But it was 4 a.m. We had a few hours for him to finish. And I hear this scrubbing. I don't know, it's like maybe a scratching. And I look over and Hunter is taking a toothbrush. The toothbrush is over there. And he's cleaning the keys in the phone of 10 years of grime. He left to procrastinate. Yeah, that's really right now, a few hours before deadline. Now is the time to clean 10 years of grime from the phone keys. He's like, he's diligent, just such a good cleaner.
Oh, it's a good thing you came in the Jeep. So we have to go down and pull my motorcycle out of the creek. It's about the first words out of Hunter's mouth. I have to go pull my motorcycle out of the creek. So, okay, sure. So we did. And then we went inside and I remember right under the window, just to the right of the front door, Hunter said, "Eat these." So I thought, well, sure. Okay. I did.
It was kind of like Hunter bolted out from his mother, Virginia, with just this incredible energy. And that energy was just all over the map. You know, it was full of compassion, full of everything that's good. It was also really vicious, cruel. It was just this tremendous amount of energy and very hard for him to be born with that, because and this is the reason he self-medicated, you know, because it was a lot to bear.
Underneath all the bravado and the fun and the frivolity and the words and the parodies and the absurdities, there was a person who was loyal and honest and true and was a gentleman. And he, you're from Kentucky. There is a kind of the ethic of being a gentleman.
You know, he represents the every generation's youthful rebelliousness and the fuck you to authority thing. And as each generation comes up, you go to college, you buy some pop from the guy at the next dorm room over, and you start reading Hunter Thompson. So, you know, as long as kids go to college and start sowing their wild oats, they'll become Hunter Thompson fans. Some of them will read his books because they will last forever, and some of them because of the persona he created that was part of his marketing scheme.
He was a political activist. Everything he wrote underneath all the drug stuff was a statement about the society. The collapse of the American dream was his main theme, and what's happening to what the America we all grew up with, and how it's being destroyed in one form or another by the civilization that's come later, if you want to call it a civilization.
Yeah, he would just say the most outrageous, unexpected, beyond the pale things that would be funny, incisive, on point, absurd, but yet open up the possibility that might happen. And so, and it was just spontaneous, just boom, boom, boom.
Man, so being able to get Anita to sit down with you I mean, and to be so candid, that had to have been a fanboy moment for you.
You know, it was really cool, man, and being able to do it, especially in the kitchen, right? Because at the time, there weren't a lot of cats that she would let do stuff because you know, Hunter wrote at that kitchen. You can see behind her the typewriter. You know, that's where he operates from.
It's very holy, and not just for like in a state for like the literary thing, but it's like for their family. That is like a sanctity.
It's Mecca. I mean, and it was a total fanboy moment because I'm sitting in there and, you know, she allowed me to smoke weed out of his bowl, which was cool. You know, it's like getting a drink out of the cup of the carpenter and fucking Indiana Jones, right? Last Crusade. And Anita was great. I mean, not only is she gracious, but I mean, she just genuinely loved the guy and appreciated his work. And yeah, it really was a cool fucking experience. And that was the last interview I did for the thing, actually. I didn't get to meet Anita on that initial trip, the fucking, you know, 30-day drive around the country trip. But her and I talked, and as you can imagine, there's a great deal of vetting out, because there are fans that are just fans that may, you know, say they're going to do one thing and have no intention of doing it, just want to be in there. And yeah, sitting with Anita and getting to really talk and bullshit and have a couple of drinks with her, and it was really cool, man. It really was.
I saw a glass on the counter. Was that some Chivas?
No, there was actually the day I went up. So I'd flown back out to Aspen. Jesus Christ, this was probably about a year after I did the initial road trip. And some guys that had just bought the Viper Room were out there pushing their bourbon, I believe it was. It was bourbon or tequila. Whatever it was, we drank a fuck ton of it. and just really had a lovely time. Went out and had drinks. After that, I got to meet Bob Broaddus, who, you know, since passed away. Bob was a great guy, and we just sat and had a couple of drinks and talked Hunter and all that. It really was a cool, like, especially at the time for a guy that had, you know, because prior to that, aside from the, you know, teaching and finishing my degree, you know, I was an actor. Like, my first speaking gig was on Breaking Bad. And that's what I was doing when I was out in New Mexico before
episode everyone wants to know.
Oh, dude, it was I was prospective house buyer number 1. And I've never watched the show. I'm waiting for Better Call Saul to end so I can kind of watch it in order, you know, since that's a prequel. It was the episode where Walt and Jesse are brewing meth. I think it's episode 7, season 1. They're brewing meth in that empty house, and the fucking real estate agent brings all those people in. I'm the guy that tried to seed the basement. And at the time, I was doing at the Santa Fe Playhouse, I was in Agatha Christie's Mousetrap. And at the ripe old age of, Jesus, at the time I was 23. At the ripe old age of 23, I was playing the 60-year-old British corp or whatever the fuck he was, Major Metcalf, right? So I had these mutton chops, like my natural stick. My hair, it was all fucking dyed gray. It was one of those like, yeah, Major Metcalf, you know what I'm saying? And so when you see the episode, I'm in complete darkness. They're like, well, we need you to trim all that shit up and wash it out. And I'm like, I'm in the middle of a fucking 5-week run, man. I can't do this business like this. And it was no shortage of fun for my buddies from Bowling Green when that came out, to hear me being called a bitch, as Aaron Paul's character, you know, did on national television. Oh, they love the fuck out of it, dude. You know, so, but that's how I started out. So yeah, with this, it was really cool as a young filmmaker and obviously a Hunter fan, and also a fellow Kentuckian. You know, I mean, that's what means a lot to me with this thing too, is that it's pushing a fellow Kentuckian's work, where people actually pay attention to it and not the persona bit, you know? So yeah, I mean, it was just, and it still is a remarkable fucking experience.
Well,
it's just such a,
it helps you put some truth to the myth and the legend. You know, a lot of people, they want the story inside the story. And that's what doomed the Hunter S. Thompson American Dream, the documentary, does. It gives you the story inside the story. Now you got to talk to Anita, but this is a 6-part series, correct?
No, it's that one was episode 1. It's 9 episodes. Because I wanted to play around with the short form.
You talked to Michael Cleverly, you talked to Joe Edwards. I mean, you got access to people that were really inside that circle.
Well, and what was really cool about it, because at the time, which is what I would encourage any burgeoning filmmaker to do, is fucking go for it. At the time, even if I knew any better, I wasn't gonna do the safe things. I reached out to Johnny Depp, Harry Dean Stanton's people, Sean Penn's folks, all that, because when you're doing a film, it was like you need a name, you need a name, you need a name. But now on this end of doing the fucking thing, I'm glad it wasn't any of the celebrity cats. I'm glad it was that core group of people I got, because they were completely honest about it. And so when questions came up, there wasn't any pussyfooting around of, well, this or that. They were very honest, in terms of the persona bit, which to me, thematically at the time, because as people watch the doc, it really hits the 72 election, really hits his run for sheriff, and it really hits the persona bit. So I'm not doing like a chronological timeline, because I figured with Google, if people want to know about where he was born, what he did and all that, they can look that shit up. And there's plenty of fine documentaries out there, like Buy the Ticket, Take the Ride, Gonzo, which there was the book and corresponding doc. I think Jan Wenner, who was, the dude that started Rolling Stone, was behind that one.
There's a good one about Ralph Steadman and him, and that one just gets deep, dude. That's a fucking fun one.
Oh, it's a great one. Those two's relationship were incredible with Ralph. And I mean, and also what an incredible artist. And you see, it was really interesting if people look at like the art for Scanlon's for the Kentucky Derby piece, because the whole crux of that is they were trying to find all the dickhead rich folks to go to the Derby, and then they turned out being the drunken assholes. But working with Hunter kind of shifted the trajectory of Ralph's work. And in my mind, certainly from that era, he's one of the most prolific, social and political artists of all time. Ralph's work's incredible. And anybody that's ever drank Flying Dog has seen his artwork,
Cheers to that. And I can't wrap up this episode without talking about the entire timeline of Hunter's story, which ended on February 20th, 2005. With Hunter taking his own life. In the other room with his entire family present, and you were there in that room, and you could, you were in a unique spot to, I guess, just to try to feel that sanctity that we talked about earlier, but we would be remiss if we didn't, mention that a lot of people relate to that in that sad moments, in the depression. A lot of the people that are going through something, they relate to Hunter Thompson, and they find that connective thing to, maybe to dwell on, or make that the relatable thing. But, not to make this a suicide awareness thing, but, if you're feeling depressed and you're feeling down, Hunter Thompson is not a personality trait, and the first thing he would say, he's not a freaking role model. But
that was kind of always his intent, and we go into that in the doc. Ed Bastian talks about it. The whole final episode of the doc really does focus on that aspect of it. But Hunter was a big proponent of Hemingway, huge fan. There was actually an article out where Anita returned something Hunter stole when he went to Hemingway's house. But Hunter was always that. Stedman had said, I think it's in Buy the Ticket, Take the Ride. And he said it in other things too, where Hunter would tell him, like, if I knew I couldn't take myself out when I wanted to, I'd feel trapped in this life. And that was always really his intent. And they say it in my doc, Lauren Jenkins, who worked with Hunter. And also, on the YouTube page, aside from the episode, I've thrown up clips of stuff I couldn't fit into the doc, where people get, and they're raw, but the raw interview footage too, because I want people to see as much as they do. But that was always Hunter's intent. He wasn't going to die old. He wasn't going to be hooked up to tubes. He wasn't going to live life where it wasn't on his terms. And, you know, he's a different beast in that regard, I think, than a lot of others, you know.
And I think he made that very clear in so much of his writing and so much, and I'm sure so much of his family life. But
well, they all knew. I mean, they knew, but like anything, you know, nobody expects it to happen. You know, you know, how could you anticipate that day?
right. And that day, the world lost a you know, a literary genius, a doctor of journalism, and a freak.
A doctor of theology.
Right. Yeah. And a husband and a father. And so, we were lucky enough to have influence like this in our life from someone like the doctor, and to be able to still talk about the influence that he has on our everyday, and the drug culture, the writing culture, the music culture, and shit, I mean, the art culture too. So you go down the list, there's so many things where, you know, Hunter S. Thompson's name still is talked about and still flows very, very much alive. And I think people like you deserve a big applause for not just doing a documentary, but doing it justice, doing it the right way, and doing it for all the right reasons. So thanks for letting your freak flag fly. Thank you for teaching us about Hunter S. Thompson. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work, Jacob, because people tell stories, and then there's people that are good at telling stories. And my friend, you're good at telling stories. Thank you.
Well, fellow doctor, thank you very much. I thought I had my fucking hat on and realized I didn't. So there we, there we have it.
Tell me
about
about
thank you for having me on. And you know, if I can say one more thing, it's like, yeah, but you know, definitely try to catch the first episode of my doc. But more importantly, you know, people watching this, read Hunter's shit. You know, if you're into him, what he represented is like a counterculture icon. Give yourself, you know, really treat yourself to reading his whole canon. I mean, truly, you owe it to yourself. And it really does, even in our fucked up world, it gives a lot of perspective on what we're going through.
Still relevant today. The words that are relevant today, the hypocrisy is still out there. The same kind of injustices that were being called out in Hunter's time needs to be called out in our time. So, you know, make yourself heard. So the documentary is called Hunter Thompson, Doomed, Hunter S. Thompson's American Dream. And Jacob Mulliken, man, appreciate it. Go check it. Go check out Berserker on Tubi too.
Fuck yeah. And the episode is available, you know, the episode and all the subsequent videos, they're on the Doomed Doc Instagram and the Doomed Hunter S. Thompson's American Dream YouTube page.
There you go. Check it out on YouTube, Doomed documentary.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in from the bluegrass state. Smoke one for me.
I'm about to go smoke me some bluegrass right after this interview, man.
That's right. Jacob Mulliken's documentary, Hydro Chef approved. Cheers, my brother.
Cheers, man. Thank you.